I'm Sarah Bennett, 35 years old, and last Monday, my world shattered when my husband Daniel died of a sudden heart attack. I was still shaking, barely able to breathe through my tears, when I called my parents for comfort. My mom's voice came through, clipped and distracted. "Sarah, we're in the middle of Ethan's promotion party right now. Can you hold on until tomorrow?" I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath me. My 9-year-old son, Noah, and I spent that night alone in our Seattle apartment, clinging to each other as our lives unraveled. I never thought my own family could turn their backs on us when we needed them most. But what they did next cut even deeper. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who should love you unconditionally, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to know. And please, hit that subscribe button to join others who get what it's like to navigate pain like this. That night, as Noah sobbed into my shoulder, asking why Daddy wasn't coming home, I realized we were facing more than just grief. We were facing a betrayal I couldn't have imagined. How could my parents, who raised me, who taught me what family means, choose a party over their daughter's heartbreak? And why, in the days that followed, did they seem more interested in Daniel's money than in helping us heal? This is the story of how Noah and I found our way through the darkness, and how a single moment changed everything we thought we knew about family. Before everything broke apart, my life with Daniel was the kind of quiet joy you don't fully appreciate until it's gone. I was 35 when this all happened, scraping by as a freelance journalist in Seattle, juggling deadlines and too much coffee. Let me take you back to when I was 23, working my first gig at a local paper, my stomach in knots over every sentence I wrote. That's when I met Daniel, a freelance photographer who could capture the world in a way that made you pause and really look. He had this unruly dark hair always falling into his eyes, a laugh that warmed the whole room, and a gentle patience that made you feel like everything would be okay. I still remember him staying late one night, helping me fix a messy article, his pen scribbling notes while he teased me about my love for semicolons. That was the beginning of us. We fell hard, got married at 25 despite friends telling us to live a little first. But Daniel was my life. He'd surprise me with coffee on mornings when I was drowning in edits, or pull me out for spontaneous picnics by the Puget Sound. He had this gift for turning the everyday into something special, like when he slipped a tiny love note into my laptop case, just because. We spent 5 years soaking up every moment before we decided to try for a baby. I thought it'd be simple, but it wasn't. 2 miscarriages left us heartbroken, drained, and scared to hope again. We were just starting to talk about adoption when I got pregnant with Noah. It was a tough pregnancy. 6 weeks of bed rest, endless doctor visits. But Daniel was there every step. He'd bring me oatmeal in bed, sketch goofy cartoons on napkins to make me smile, and read parenting books out loud like they were fairy tales. When Noah was born, Daniel cried harder than I did, holding our son like he was the most fragile, perfect thing. For 9 years, we were a little team. Daniel was the dad who'd spend hours teaching Noah to draw, guiding his small hands to sketch trees and stars. He'd take Noah camping in the Cascades, even though he was terrible at setting up tents. I'd catch them laughing over YouTube tutorials, trying to master knots. Daniel never missed a school event. His phone was bursting with colorful calendar. Alerts for Noah's art classes, violin recitals, you name it. He'd show up with his camera, snapping photos like Noah was a celebrity. "Gotta capture the masterpiece," he'd say, winking at me. Looking back, there were signs we brushed off. Daniel would get worn out quicker than usual, blaming it on late nights editing photos. Sometimes he'd rub his chest, wincing, but he'd laugh it off as heartburn from my spicy chili. His doctor mentioned mild stress-related symptoms, nothing to worry about. Cut back on caffeine, take it easy. We didn't dwell on it. Daniel was 36, full of life, always moving. How could we have known? Those years with him and Noah were everything to me. A messy, beautiful everything. Sundays were for sprawling on the living room floor, Noah sketching while Daniel and I bickered over who made better pancakes. I can still hear Daniel's voice, teasing me about my lumpy batter, promising Noah a star-shaped pancake for breakfast the next day. That was the life we built, the one I thought would go on forever. But then, one phone call changed it all. Before I tell you about that, though, let me explain how my family fit into this, or rather, how they didn't. That Monday started like any other, the kind of morning you don't think twice about until it becomes the last one you get. Daniel was in the kitchen, humming some off-key tune, cutting star shapes into Noah's toast while I scrambled to pack his lunch for school. Noah, all of 9 years old, was chattering about his violin recital that evening, begging Daniel to bring his camera for epic shots. Daniel laughed, ruffling Noah's hair, and promised he'd be home early, front row, ready to cheer. He kissed us both goodbye, his lips warm against my forehead, and headed out for a photo shoot at Golden Gardens Park. "Don't forget to grab more honey for the toast," he called over his shoulder, grinning. Such a small, everyday thing to say. I never imagined those would be his last words to me. I was at my desk, wrestling with a half-finished article, when my phone buzzed at 11:03 a.m. It was Clara, Daniel's friend and fellow photographer, her voice trembling so much I could barely make out the words. "Sarah, it's Daniel. He collapsed during the shoot. The ambulance is here. They're taking him to Harborview." My heart stopped. I don't remember hanging up or grabbing my keys, but I do remember the coffee mug slipping from my hand, shattering on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I called our neighbor, Jen, to pick Noah up from school, then sped to the hospital, weaving through Seattle traffic, praying under my breath. I begged God, the universe, anyone who'd listen to let him be okay, but I was too late. Daniel was gone by the time I got there, pronounced dead at 11:42 a.m. "A massive heart attack," the doctor said, his face kind but helpless. There was nothing anyone could have done, he told me, as if that could soften the blow. Seeing Daniel's body was like stepping into a nightmare. He looked so peaceful, like he was just napping after a long shoot, but his chest was still, too still. I touched his face, his skin still warm, and waited for him to open his eyes, to flash that grin and tell me it was all a mistake. He didn't. The next hours blurred into a haze of paperwork and impossible choices. Cremation or burial? What kind of service? Did he have a favorite tie? I wanted to scream that none of it mattered. I just wanted my husband back. The hardest part was knowing I had to tell Noah. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that his dad, the one who cut stars into his toast that morning, was never coming? Home? I picked him up from school, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Noah climbed into the car, his violin case clutched tight, and immediately sensed something was wrong. "Where's Dad?" "He said he'd be at my recital," he said, his voice small. I pulled over because I couldn't see through my tears. I took his hands, so tiny in mine, and forced the words out. "Noah, something really sad happened today. Dad got very sick at work, and his heart stopped. The doctors couldn't fix it. He died." Noah's face crumpled, his brown eyes, so like Daniel's, searching mine for a lie. "But they can fix hearts, right? They have machines," he pleaded. I shook my head, my throat tight. "Not this time, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." He let out a sob that broke something inside me, a sound no child should ever make. "I want Dad," he cried, throwing himself into my arms. "Please, I want my dad." All I could do was hold him, crying with him, as cars passed by on the rainy Seattle street, oblivious to our world falling apart. That night, I tucked Noah into my bed, his small body curled around Daniel's old sweatshirt, the one that still smelled like him. As he finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, I sat there, staring at the empty space where Daniel should have been, wondering how we'd ever survive this. After Daniel died, the world felt like it was moving in slow motion, every moment heavy with the weight of his absence. That first night, after Noah finally fell asleep clutching his dad's sweatshirt, I sat on the bathroom floor, door locked so he wouldn't hear me break. My chest ached like someone was pressing down on it, and all I could think was that I needed my parents. They'd been married 38 years, weathered their own storms. Surely they'd know how to help me through this. So, with hands shaking, I dialed their number, desperate for a lifeline. My mom picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear chatter and clinking glasses in the background, the sounds of a party in full swing. "Sarah, can I call you back?" she said, her voice light, distracted. "We're at Ethan's promotion. Party. Big night for him." I choked out the words, barely audible through my sobs. "Mom, Daniel died this morning. Heart attack. He's gone." There was a pause, then muffled voices as she covered the phone. When she came back, her tone was a little softer but still rushed. "Oh, honey, that's awful. Are you sure? Maybe it's a mistake." I swallowed hard, the words cutting deeper. "I saw him, Mom. He's gone." Having to convince my own mother that my husband was dead felt like a fresh wound on top of everything else. She sighed, and I heard her whisper something to someone else. "This is such a shock, Sarah, but we've got all of Ethan's colleagues here, the caterers, the whole deal. Can you manage tonight? We'll come by tomorrow." I couldn't believe it. My brother's promotion to some fancy tech lead role at his software company was more important than my husband's death, than Noah and me falling apart. My dad got on the line, his voice gruff. "Sarah, terrible news. Was Daniel's trust fund set up properly? You should call the lawyer first. Thing. Not we're on our way, not how's Noah. Just a cold question about money while my husband's body wasn't even cold yet." "I can't believe you're asking me this," I said, my voice hollow. "My son just lost his dad." Dad's tone turned sharp, the one he used when I was a kid and dared to argue. "Now, Sarah, don't be dramatic. Ethan's worked years for this. We can't just leave. Be reasonable." I hung up, my hands trembling, feeling more alone than ever. Meanwhile, word spread, and my phone lit up with texts from people who actually cared. Clara, Daniel's photographer friend, sent a heartfelt message offering to help with anything. My old editor, Mark, who I hadn't seen in years, called to check on me. Even Jen, our neighbor, showed up with a lasagna and sat with me at the kitchen table, helping me jot down a list of people to notify. Strangers showed more heart than my own family. That night stretched on forever. Noah kept waking up, crying out for his dad, his small voice breaking my heart all over again. I'd stroke his hair, whispering stories about Daniel, how he'd sketch constellations with him, how he'd cheer louder than anyone at his art shows. Noah would nod, clutching that sweatshirt, until he fell back into a fitful sleep. I stayed, awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's side of the bed empty and cold. By morning, the reality hit harder. This wasn't a nightmare I could escape. This was our life now, without Daniel, and apparently without the family I thought I could count on. My parents called once, a quick voicemail about checking in later, but didn't ask about Noah or offer to help with the funeral. It was like Daniel's death was an inconvenience, something to pencil in after Ethan's big moment. I didn't know it then, but their betrayal was only the beginning. What they did next would show me who they really were, and push Noah and me to find strength we didn't know we had. The days after Daniel's death blurred into a fog of grief and endless tasks. Planning his funeral felt like betraying him. How could I reduce the love of my life to decisions about caskets and hymns? But I did it for Noah, for us, to say goodbye properly. The service was set for Saturday, 5 days after he collapsed, at a small chapel near our Seattle apartment. I hoped maybe naively, that my family would show up for us then, that they'd set aside Ethan's big promotion moment to be there when we needed them most. I was wrong. Those days were brutal. I'd catch Noah staring at Daniel's camera on the shelf, his small hands tracing the lens, whispering, "Dad would have taken 1,000,000 pictures." I'd pull him close, trying to be strong, but inside I was crumbling. My parents barely called, just a quick message asking what time the service started and whether it was formal or one of those colorful life celebration things. No offers to help with arrangements, no questions about how Noah was holding up. Meanwhile, Daniel's family stepped in like they'd been waiting for the call. His younger sister Anna flew in from Portland, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady as she offered to handle the flowers. His parents, Linda and Tom, drove up from Tacoma, bringing photo albums of Daniel's childhood to share with Noah, giving him stories to hold on to. The funeral morning was crisp and sunny, too, beautiful for such a dark day. Noah insisted on wearing the green sweater Daniel always said made him look like a forest explorer. I braided his hair the way Daniel used to, a small ritual that felt like keeping him close. We got to the chapel early to greet people. Daniel's photographer friends showed up, some in tears, others sharing quiet stories about his knack for capturing the perfect moment. They knelt to talk to Noah, telling him how his dad would brag about his drawings. My parents and Ethan were supposed to be there early too, but 20 minutes before the service, I got a text from Mom. "Traffic's a mess, running late." They strolled in as people were taking seats, Mom's heels clicking loudly. Ethan scrolling on his phone like he was checking work emails. They slid into the front row I'd saved for family, Mom giving me a quick hug that smelled of her sharp perfume. "Sorry, Ethan had a last-minute call with his team," she whispered, as if that explained everything. During the service, I felt their detachment like a physical weight. Ethan kept glancing at his watch. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. But they stayed dry, and Dad shifted impatiently. In contrast, Daniel's family was a rock. Anna sat beside Noah, holding his hand, her own tears falling as the pastor spoke. Linda and Tom gripped each other's hands, their grief raw, but their presence steady for us. When it was time for the eulogy, my knees shook as I walked to the podium. I wasn't sure I could do it, but then I saw Noah in his green sweater, so small but so brave, and the words came. I talked about Daniel's love for light, how he'd chase sunsets with his camera, how he'd dance with Noah in the living room to cheesy pop songs. I spoke of his terrible puns that made us groan and his fierce love for his son. As I finished, I glanced at my parents, already gathering their coats, clearly eager to leave. At the reception back at our apartment, I overheard Dad talking to my uncle near the coffee pot. Daniel was doing well, big clients. That trust fund must be hefty. Sarah's set for life. My blood boiled, but I was too drained to confront him, too focused on Noah, who was curled up with Anna, clutching a photo of Daniel. My family barely helped, leaving Daniel's friends and Linda to manage the food and guests. Mom and Ethan sat in the corner, accepting condolences like they were the ones grieving most. As I moved through the day, thanking people, accepting Tupperware I'd never open, I felt the gap between my family and Daniel's like a chasm. And I knew, deep down, this was only the start of their betrayal. The weeks after Daniel's funeral felt like wading through quicksand. Every day was a battle to get out of bed, to smile for Noah, to keep our little world from collapsing. I was drowning in grief and paperwork, bills, funeral costs, and figuring out what Daniel's trust fund meant for our future. Noah was struggling too, quieter than usual, spending hours sketching in his room, his pencil scratching late into the night. I thought my family might finally step up, offer a shoulder, or even just a phone call. Instead, they showed me exactly who they were, and it was worse than I'd ever imagined. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was sorting through emails when the doorbell rang. Noah was at school, his first week back, and I was alone, barely holding it together. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing on the porch, Mom adjusting her scarf, Dad straightening his jacket like he was heading to a board meeting. I hadn't heard from them since their half-hearted voicemail after the funeral, so their sudden visit caught me off guard. "We thought we'd check in," Mom said, brushing past me into the living room. "Noah's at school? Good, we can. Talk freely." Her tone sent a chill down my spine, but I was too exhausted to catch the warning signs. I made coffee, slipping into the role of host, even though they should have been the ones taking care of me. Dad settled on the couch, eyeing the new bookshelf Daniel had built before he died. "Nice piece," he said, like he was appraising it. Daniel had good taste. I nodded, the past tense stabbing at my heart. After some awkward small talk about Noah's school and Mom's book club, Dad cleared his throat, his serious business voice kicking in. "Sarah, we need to talk about your situation," he said, setting his mug down. "Your financial situation now that Daniel's gone." I stared, not following. "What do you mean? Daniel left us taken care of." Mom exchanged a glance with Dad, then leaned forward. "Exactly. With that trust fund, you're in a position to help family. We're not getting younger, and our savings took a hit with the market. Ethan's looking to start a tech venture too. He could use a boost." The words hit like a slap. "Are you asking for money?" I said, my voice flat. Mom flushed, but Dad pressed on, unfazed. "We're thinking something fair, like 45% of the trust fund for us and 15% for Ethan's startup. That leaves plenty. For you and Noah." 60%. They wanted 60% of the money Daniel had set aside for his son's future. For our survival. I repeated their words slowly, making sure I wasn't imagining it. "You want more than half of what Daniel left for Noah, after you couldn't even leave Ethan's party when I told you he died." Mom winced, but Dad's face hardened. "Don't be emotional, Sarah. We raised you, paid for your college. It's practical to support family now that you've got means." I stood, my voice shaking with rage. My husband died. Noah lost his dad. This isn't a lottery win. It's our lifeline. Get out. They left, muttering about my attitude, but I was done. I thought that was the end of it, but a week later, they called me to a family meeting at their house. Noah overheard and insisted on coming, clutching a sketchbook he'd been working on obsessively. "I want to be there, Mom," he said, his eyes fierce in a way that reminded me of Daniel. We arrived at my parents' suburban Seattle home, where I'd spent countless childhood weekends, only to find an ambush. My aunt and uncle were there, along with a couple of cousins, all seated like a jury. Dad sat in his armchair, holding a printed document, while Ethan lounged on the sofa, scrolling his phone. Mom started, her voice sugary. "Sarah, we've been discussing the family's needs. Given the trust fund size, we propose 45% for us and 15% for Ethan. It's only fair." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Fair? You didn't come when Daniel died. You didn't ask how Noah's coping. You want Noah's future for your retirement and Ethan's startup?" Dad stood, his voice booming. "We raised you, Sarah. You owe us respect." Before I could respond, Noah stepped forward, his sketchbook trembling in his hands. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice clear despite the shake. Mom smiled, patronizing. "Sweetie, this is grown-up talk." Noah didn't flinch, channeling Daniel's quiet strength. "It's about Dad and what he'd want." He opened his sketchbook and pulled out a drawing, handing it to my dad. It was a colorful invoice, painted with Noah's careful strokes, titled "Bill for Real Family." It listed, "Hugging Mom when she cried for Dad, $0, not done. Playing with me when I was sad, $0, not done. Being there when Dad died, $0, not done." At the bottom, in bold letters, "Real family doesn't ask for money." The room went silent. Dad's hands shook as he held the drawing. Mom's face crumpled, and Ethan finally looked up from his phone, stunned. Noah's small voice cut through. "That's what you came for, right? This is what you earned." I took Noah's hand, my heart swelling with pride and pain. "We're done here," I said quietly. "Don't contact us unless you can show you've changed. Noah deserves better, and so do I." We walked out, leaving them speechless, the weight of Noah's truth hanging in the air. In that moment, I knew we'd faced their betrayal head-on, and Noah, my brave boy, had shown me we were stronger than I thought. Leaving my parents' house that day, with Noah's hand in mine, felt like stepping out of a storm into quiet. His drawing, that bold bill for real family, had shifted something, not just for them, but for us. I was proud of my boy, but my heart ached that he'd had to grow up so fast, facing their greed head-on. In the car, I hugged him tight. "You were so brave, Noah. Dad would have been over the moon." He nodded, his voice small. "I just wanted them to see what Dad taught me. That family shows up no matter what." His words, so like Daniel's, brought tears to my eyes. I knew then we'd be okay, not because the pain was gone, but because we had each other and Daniel's love guiding us. The weeks that followed were raw. I found a video Daniel had recorded a few months before he died, tucked away in his editing files. He was at his desk, camera angled crookedly, talking to me like he knew I'd need him later. "Sarah, if you're watching this, something went wrong with my heart. The trust funds for you and Noah, don't let anyone guilt you out of it. Your dad's asked me for investments before and I said no. He might try again. Protect our boy's future." His voice cracked, but he smiled. "You're stronger than you know, love. Keep chasing sunsets for me." I sobbed, torn between grief and awe at his foresight. Daniel had seen my parents' true colors and shielded me, even from beyond. My family didn't let up at first. Mom sent guilt-laced emails. Dad got my uncle to call, pleading their case. Ethan posted vague social media rants about ungrateful siblings. I blocked their numbers, needing space to breathe. Meanwhile, the people who mattered showed up. Anna, Daniel's sister, moved to Seattle for a few months, teaching Noah photography tricks Daniel loved. Linda and Tom, his parents, called Noah every week, sending him art supplies and stories about his dad's goofy teenage years. Clara organized a meal train with Daniel's photographer friends, filling our fridge with casseroles. Their love was a lifeline, showing me family isn't blood, it's who stays when it's hard. About 3 months later, a handwritten letter arrived from my parents. No formal letterhead, just Mom's shaky cursive. "Sarah, Noah, we've spent weeks facing how we failed you. We let greed blind us to your pain, to Daniel's memory. We're in therapy, trying to understand why we got it so wrong. We don't expect forgiveness, but we hope to earn your trust someday." It was the first time they owned their mistakes, without excuses. I showed it to Anna, unsure what to feel. "It's a start," she said, "but it's on them to prove it." I tucked the letter away, not ready to respond, but a small part of me wondered if change was possible. Ethan took longer. 6 months after Daniel's death, he sent an email, short but real. "I've been jealous of you forever, Sarah. You always had your shit together while I was chasing status. I was wrong to push for Dad's plan. I'm working on it." It wasn't a full fix, but it was honest. A crack in the wall between us. Slowly, my parents started showing up differently. They asked to see Noah for his birthday, offering 15 minutes at his favorite ice cream shop, with me there, no pressure. Noah agreed, and they kept it simple. Asked about his drawings, listened, didn't mention money. It was awkward, but it felt like a step. On the first anniversary of Daniel's death, we held a photo exhibit in his honor at a Seattle gallery. Noah displayed his bill for real family drawing, now framed alongside Daniel's prints. Friends, colleagues, even strangers came, sharing stories of Daniel's warmth. My parents showed up, quiet and respectful, bringing a photo of Daniel I'd never seen, from a family trip years ago. They stayed in the background, honoring him, not themselves. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I started a scholarship fund in Daniel's name, helping kids in need learn photography, turning our loss into something that felt like light. A year later, Noah and I stood on a Seattle beach, the same one where Daniel used to chase waves with his camera. We let a photo of him float out to sea, a quiet goodbye. Noah looked up, thoughtful. "Mom, Dad said family's the people who lift you up, not pull you down. I think Grandma and Grandpa are trying now." I nodded, tears falling. "You're right, buddy. And Dad would love that you're giving them a chance." I've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, respect, and showing up when it counts. Healing doesn't mean forgetting Daniel or the hurt, but choosing who we let into our circle, who we trust to hold our hearts. If you've ever had to redraw the lines of family, to stand up for what matters, I see you. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Like and subscribe if this resonated, and let's keep healing together. Because in the end, it's not about who you're born to, but who you choose to walk with, hand in hand, through the light and the dark.